Hey, I'm Dr. Dustin Boston here with the athletic trainer herself, Erin. We are super excited to share with you a podcast that was previously recorded and released back in January or February, where Erin and I and the Pure Athlete were really showcased on the Crackin podcast. So we're going to share that with you this week. Hope you enjoy. Leave us some feedback. Have fun.
Dustin, welcome to the show, man. I mean, like we were just talking off air, you're way more advanced than we are with your background. But you know what? Damn it, we're gonna have a good time. and
Absolutely.
and you're not
Absolutely.
only as the background, we'll talk about the second. Not only a leader in the world of sports chiropractic, but you also have a successful podcast. As people will see when the show comes out on audio, video, the Pure Athlete. So, where did you come up with that name? And let's talk about what constitutes a pure athlete in your mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the Pure Athlete was really founded around the lifestyle that I wanted to make sure that student athletes had access to. So I believe a lot of parents and athletes want data. They want information, whether it's structural or performance. And so I just kind of started racking my brain. Our practice is vital performance, and then the Pure Athlete just came about. Just the lifestyle. It's like, how can we make the purebreds even more pure from a athletic standpoint, a lifestyle standpoint, and just as individuals. I mean, they're all people, and they want the outcome, and they want the health, and we're excited to be able to give it. And that's really where the pure came from, is how pure can we make somebody's health, but also lifestyle and everything else around it as they continue through school and sport.
Dustin, what do you mean by literally, pure? Describe what that would look like if you were considered a pure athlete.
Yeah, that's just being well rounded. There's so much more to sport, believe it or not. I mean, that was a big passion of mine, was being able to do some pretty cool things in sport, and so it came from really not forgetting that you're a person. So purely paying attention to yourself, and understanding what's around you, and really have a clarity about what's going on, what's happening inside and outside of a lifestyle. So whether it's what you put in your body, what you're fueling it with, the care that you're receiving, even outside of sport, outside of the lines, and purely understanding that there's more to you than just the one dimension of what's in front of the scoreboard or between the lines. So I mean, it's really an all encompassing from what you put in your body, how you treat it, what your lifestyle is like, and how you treat people. The Pure Athlete was based around mental, physical, and relationships, and having a pure direction and resources and understanding of what that looks like, I think is super important. And that's really uh, how we've defined the Pure Athlete, is being very clear in those three categories. And I don't think there's a lot of us that I don't think have reached that point yet, which is why we wanted to start to bring this to light.
That's so great. We were all educated that the trigon of health. Mental, nutritional, physical. You mentioned relationships, and I think that's really powerful. Um, is there an area where you emphasize most? I mean, we always talk about nutrition. We can tweak your nutrition. We can tweak your physical
Mhm.
behavior and characteristic. Um, the mental fascinates me. Could you share a little bit about your concept and the mental aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a huge passion of mine. It's actually it's something that's very close to me. I think when I started this, the whole line that I thought of with the Pure Athlete is, I just don't want student athletes to suck in any facet. I don't want them to suck on the field. I don't want them to suck as students. I don't want their mental health and clarity to suck. I want them to be confident. So speaking on the mental side of it, the other pretty bold statement that I've made that a lot of people ask me about is there's so much that these athletes and everybody in society, not just athletes, but there's so much that these athletes want to talk about, need to talk about, don't know how to talk about, who to talk to, and it's getting more and more intense from everything from whether it's medications or suicides, and there's so much on the table in the mental aspect that needs to be discussed and talked about. There's on our podcast that drops, I think it drops this Friday, we have a Navy SEAL who we're collaborating with, which goes with the relationship side of things, to give resources for athletes to talk about it. It doesn't have to be so intense where they're so depressed and down that, I've said, I just don't want to see athletes jump out windows anymore. We had that at my undergrad. I had a cousin with a close friend who did the same thing, was ineligible for lacrosse. And you go to that extent thinking there's no way out. The soccer player at Stanford, it's like there's more of this coming out, and that's the extreme examples. But it's like, what's the mentality of these kids when they have a parent that says, you go 3 for 4 in a baseball game with 2 home runs and a triple, and a parent goes, hey, great game, what happened with that strikeout? How do you handle that? How do you what's the mentality around something like that? Or your significant other of 3 years breaks up with you, and you're in college, or you're transitioning to college, or you move away. It's like there's so many mental mental perspectives and angles that you can come from with that. And I think we all here can agree, it's like, do they really know? Do they know how to talk about things like that? Do they know how to bring it up? And I think the resources are getting better, but how available are they? So it's pretty close to me. I see a lot of that. And I think there's a lot of athletes, professional and under in college and in high school, that could be even better just wrapping around not the mental toughness, but just understanding how to navigate that whole mental health clarity during the game, but also as a student and as a spouse or future spouse. There's just so much at stake, and I think that's why it's a big pillar.
Are you noticing it more lately? Or, I mean, I know that the more you specialize in that area of mental health,
Mhm.
are you noticing kids are not equipped with the social skills? Are you seeing that more often? I don't want to lead you into the
Yeah.
answer, but do you feel
No,
that?
I think I know what you're getting at. Absolutely. I mean, look how things have changed. I mean, what am I, 30, 37? My baseball career, I chose to end in 2006. We were still playing Snake on the green screen Nokias and stuff. That was still brand new. We just transitioned from the bag phones. MySpace was still number one. Like,
Yeah.
and you just look at all of the tip of the icebergs that these kids see all the time, and all of the all of the trophies that people want to display, and how they interact, Snapchat and Google this and YouTube that and vlogging and all this stuff. And it's like, I think you get in the locker room now, and those relationships look a lot different than when the steel curtain was in was in Pittsburgh. It's like, what did that social lifestyle look like? So there's kind of my extreme of like, okay, with 30, 40 years, hell yeah, that's changed. So I think absolutely the social aspect is something that I wouldn't say we need to evolve with necessarily, but maybe getting back to the KISS mentality, and teaching these kids and getting them more aware of what's available, what's to come, because there's a lot of standards that haven't changed when it comes to transitioning from junior high to high school to college to potentially professional. So I think, yes, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of that, and it's probably the number one question of, I think to directly answer that question better, is the one thing I'm hearing the most is, I don't know how to bring it up, which means they don't know how to communicate, and they don't know what's available.
Yeah. Social skills. Yeah. Are you also, are you seeing, I don't think people realize how much pressure a student athlete is under compared to what do they call them? NARPs, non-athletic regular people. That's what some of my students call it.
Yeah.
The student that's not an athlete, a NARP. I go, what's a NARP,
Yeah.
man?
Yeah.
But we see that, and then we see these regular just students that aren't athletes that are having terrible social troubles and skills, and they're the ones hurting themselves and suicide and all that. But man, the student athlete, are you seeing that more often too?
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, I think really the social skills. I mean, to wrap up that last question, I think the social skills, being a part of a team or having that avenue, is actually great for continuing to develop the social skills. But then the pressure that's put on them. One of the other things we hear is, it's typically when I ask what do you guys want resources around. I said I just had 7 athletes before I jumped on here that we were taking care of. And I'll ask them from time to time, like, if we could talk about one thing, if we were going to make a course or get on stage and talk about something for an hour, what would it be? And it's mental health and time management. And these kids that go transition into college, and even college to professional, it's like, ask how many 30-year-old professionals think they have their time management skills figured out. Some of them are lucky enough to have resources that handle it for them, because it is tough. But you take a 18, 19-year-old kid, and it's like, they know what they need to do, but the biggest problem is it's like, when do I need to be there? Well, I got class here. When do I study? When do I this? And just the pressure of the time management side is huge. And then, how do I break up life as an athlete in the locker room for 6-8 hours, 6, 8, 10 hours a day, to being with my NARPs that maybe aren't athletes, and how do we shut that down? I think there's a lot of pressure between the social side and grades. I mean, time management. It's there's a lot more pressure than people think, and there's a lot of research out there too, showing the polls and some of the data that they've shown that when you ask student athletes, there's a very high percentage that said they feel like they're behind. They feel like there's more stress in student athletes than there are in the general population of the NARPs, of the students that maybe aren't athletes. So not only is there statistical data on that, but yeah, we're seeing that too. I mean, we're parked in between 3 not big schools. Lindenwood just went D1, but that are asking the same questions. And with my 2 athletic trainers that help out at local universities, they're saying the same things. They're seeing the same things we're talking about. So it's nice to have that impact and start to have some of those athletes come here, where we do nights to, one, socially engage them, but hear them out. Like, what are their biggest problems? What are their biggest stressors? Because yeah, I think they're under considerably more stress than people really realize. And not to ramble on, but I think a lot of people kind of take that for granted too, as it's like, oh, well, you're an athlete, suck it up. And sometimes I think that's the most dangerous thing you can say, because they could literally be asking for help or not know they need to. I don't think a lot of athletes think they're above anybody else. I think there's a confidence that they instill in themselves, and that's how they walk. And there should be a little chip on your shoulder. If you don't have one, I don't want you on my team. But I think that could publicly put a lot of pressure on them too, because I think there's a lot of times they're very misunderstood as well. So that's kind of a stereotype we're trying to change. Teach the athlete how to deal with that, how to humble themselves, the relational side of that, but also get the public involved of like, look, we're not trying to make excuses for them at all. We're not going to coddle them, but let's be a little more mindful of what they do have to go through, and the traveling they do, and the studies they have to keep up, and what's put on them. Majority of these athletes are not blue chip athletes making $20 million a year on NILs. They have to get their classwork done. They have to show up. There's a lot of things they need to do, and that's a lot of stress and pressure for sure.
There's something you mentioned, a lot of variables, and there's one that you may vouch for, and that is a athlete that's on a losing team, or an athlete that's doing that's not doing well with their athletic abilities, but more so, the idea of if a team is losing their season, and because you actually also take care of the physical and the nutritional aspect of it. So would you happen to see more injuries amongst the losing team?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd say there's more on the losing team. I think there's more there's definitely some more of the discussion of I think you'll see a lot of athletes choose to have an injury. if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a sad way to go about it, where it's like sometimes people chalk it up. There's certain people that just chalk it up, and maybe they'll have a a hamstring injury or something because they are having such a tough season. Definitely not the right way to go about it, but it happens. But as far as like having true traumatic injury because of a losing season, I can't say I've seen that anymore. Um, However, it is a big, I love that side of things on the mental side, because how do you overcome the mental side? How do you stay engaged? So I would say the biggest injury is here. How do you manage the losing season? How do you, I mean, look at the Detroit Lions. I mean, they're playing in the or the NFC championship right now. 3 years ago, they couldn't win more than 2 games in 2 years. Like, how do you deal with that? That's probably the biggest injury we see on a losing team is you got to change the perspective.
When we were when we were with the Miami Dolphins and they went 1 win and 16 losses,
Yeah.
we were surrounded by psychologists coming in. And one of my favorite guys, I go, oh my God, what's going on here? He goes,
Yeah.
well, you think about it. They can't even go out. They can't go out to, their nightclubs or movies or dinner without someone, getting in their face, a fan
Yeah.
or whatever, like, what's wrong with you guys? So there's a lot of emotional stress that, turns into physical
This poor Bills
manifestations.
kicker.
What's that?
This poor Bills kicker after last weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, that's talk about changing a perspective. He should have never been in that scenario, and think of what's his, and he's not guaranteed a kind of a mental health conversation by any means, but do you think that could be involved?
Right.
Maybe.
I always used to tell my kickers, I go, a kicker, you can never lose. So you either are equal to the rest of the players or you're a hero. But the game,
Yeah.
you're never the loser. And yet the
Mm-mm.
society would go, that guy lost the game. I go, no,
Yeah.
the team lost the game. He just is equal to them, because if you rely on that field goal to win, the team was in the red zone for how many times and they didn't get it in. It's not that he's equal to that.
Mhm.
A question I have is something I've seen in the last probably 5 years. I'm gonna hear your perspective on it. You're seeing now, you mentioned the NIL. So now with the NIL coming in, you're not getting these kids drafted out of high school as much unless they're a 5-star athlete and a 4. 3-star athletes aren't getting they're having to go to JC schools or smaller schools and work their way up. But we're seeing kids transfer their junior year to go to a school that may have a more winning team or a better team. So now you're taking
Mhm.
15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and they're being moved all over just for the thought process of trying to get them to a better school to hopefully get to a better program. And it's all based on, growth. And so how you seeing that? And then they're getting into a college and they're being transfer portals. So you're never gaining relationships like you used to in the
Yeah.
locker room. It's almost like when the Major League Baseball went into, individuals instead of these teams, that you don't start. Very few people like a Kelsey starts a team and then retires with the same team. And now you're seeing it at the high
Yeah.
school. So how are you handling the mix of never having relationships, which we all think is super important when it comes to sports?
Yeah, I think that it'll be fun to use this as a clip and then look at it even just 5 or 10 years from now of the players who have some of those big contracts, or the big NIL deals. I think you're going to continue to see that harm them. The one thing that Erin and I, my athletic trainer, who's really a partner in the Pure Athlete at this point, we talk about all the time is there's life after sport. And what's the statistics of how many of these even professional athletes? There's a story of Mark Cuban seeing one of his power forwards in the middle of a median asking for money. And he used to play for the Mavericks like years back. So one, I'm afraid with how they're going to be able to manage that. Do they have the right people in their corner? Again, I've got a great friend who we're embarking on how to. He's a great financial advisor who can help these kids and give them a lot of content on one, how to manage it if they get it. But on the relational side of things, I think they're gonna wish they'd have stuck, not just stuck in stayed in one spot, but I think they would have been more apt to focus on the relationship of how that comes about, no matter where you go, versus how much that is depends on where you go. I think it's going to harm a lot of them in the long term if they're concentrating on the wrong thing. Let's just call it what it is. If you want to focus on the money, like, you're going to get what you focus on to an extent. But at the end of the day, money can run out. The way you manage your relationships, that that lasts forever. It can. It's up to you to ruin it, and it's up to you not to make it. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and probably the most underrated thing we talk about all the time. Physical, number one; mental, number two; and relationships is probably the most underrated that we start talking about, because the more hands you can shake, you don't know who's in the stands, you don't know who's behind the money, in front of the money. You could take a deal that could have cost you could take a $20 million deal now and have that relationship for your 4 years of college. And you could have missed out on the relationship that was standing right next to it, that didn't want to give you the money up front, wanted you to earn it. You could have missed out on $120 million later. So it's, also the trajectory of where your career could go. I mean, there's so much. I think a lot of people make a quick decision, make a now decision, and sacrifice a big outcome later, potentially. There's a lot of them that works out. That's not standard, but I think a lot of people will take the quick money and then miss out potentially on the big money. But more importantly, they'll pass up the simple relationships and miss out on the big relationships.
You talk about leadership a lot and how important that is. Could you have more of a discussion about why that's so important and how you might help a athlete realize that they need to be a better leader?
Yeah, I think changing this perspective of the definition of a leader is important, and how you get there. Leadership is earned. Leadership isn't a title; it's something you've earned. It's not given; it's earned, but it's an action. It's not a title. It's not a descriptive word. It's an action. And so I think a lot of what we talk about in some of the athletes that I personally coach, that maybe don't have the C on their chest yet, and maybe they strive for that. There's a lot of them that are starting to get the hint that it's action. Like, you can lip service, you could be the first in the gym, you can do all of those kinds of things, but Steve Nash led the league in high fives. That shit matters. Like, let's start talking about how it goes back to the relationship side of things. Are you there to be a leader so you can stand in the middle of the field at the beginning of the game and make the calls, and the coach looks to you on the field? Or are you truly trying to lead a team to make sure they're better today than they were yesterday? Are you holding yourself to that next level standard? Do you have that Mamba mentality of, I'm at least 1% better every day? And I think that's so important, because I think a lot of people want to be looked at as leadership. They want to have that title. I think they think less comes with that, or they're less under fire if they are a leader, where it's the exact opposite, where everybody else needs to put in 110%. And you need to put in 220. So that's something that I instill from a leadership standpoint, for sure, is just change the perspective on it's an action, not an adjective necessarily.
How do you help an athlete that's injured and doing the why me thing? I have a feeling you got something special packed away in that brain of yours for that one.
Yeah, that's tough. You look at, you brought up the Dolphins. We watched a little bit of Hard Knocks and saw some of that, and you see, how many injuries did they have this year? You've got one of those, I can't remember his name, but he's a great example of did everything, almost lost everything in college, came for a tryout, made the team, gets injured this year, having a career year, a Pro Bowl style of a year, gets injured early in the season. The victim mentality is easy to go to. The mind wants you to be, the mind wants to take the easy way out, because the sooner you can just get over it and be like, you know what, why me? It's like, I can't believe it. It didn't happen to this person. I've done this a million times. It's not in your way, it's on your way. Yeah. And, I'm a firm believer that everything does happen for a reason. Right, wrong, or indifferent might not be the most popular statement ever, but it's, if you get knocked down and land on your back, at least you're looking up. If you want to fall down face first and kick and cry and scream. But at the end of the day, if you are injured, if you do take that injury, there is somebody that can learn from you. If you're willing to teach them in that time, if you're willing to reallocate your time on the field, or not on the field, but your time at practice, your time in the film room, your time with rookies or freshmen, your time with the coaches, if you can reallocate all that time you spent in the weight room and all that live action practice and all of the film time that you had to do because you were that starter, if you can reallocate that time and be like, okay, how can I serve this team better? How can I help the coaching staff? How can I change the perspective? I said something on one of our podcasts recently. If you could coach without saying a word and make a team successful, that's doing something. If we can teach these kids and empower them, now they need a little lip service. They need a pat on the ass, and they need to be told, like, look, it's not the end of the world. They need some of that confidence. They don't need coddled. But if we can get them to redirect and be like, look, are you done now? You done kicking your feet? I get it. I'm with you. I hate that it happened. But let's take that brain space that you're in right now, flip it, because you have all of this time to pour into this rookie. You have all of this time to help me throw balls over the middle. You have all of this time to help us explain films from your perspective. You have more time that you can still invest and be potentially even more of an asset from a different angle. But if you want to kick and scream, that might be the door for you. So that's my biggest thing, is just reallocate the time. Unfortunate, yes, but you can see your way out the door if you want to play the victim card. Not always easy, but how much of that is talked about? How much of that is coached on? And I think there's probably a fair amount. I'm sure I'm not the first one to say something like that, but it's like, how prevalent is that? Because I think that's a great question. And we love talking about that. The mental side of thing, I'm not a sports psychologist, don't claim to be. I just love the mental side of perspectives. That's my big word, is perspectives. Reallocate that time. Stop playing victim. Reallocate the time, because in the moment of anger, serve more, give more. You're gonna make yourself happier. The more you help people up off the ground when you're hurt, it's gonna make you feel better that you were able to serve them in that moment.
Dustin, you are the epitome of what I share with my interns all the time. Is a physician is meant to inspire their patients. You have to be a motivator, and it's easy to be that way when you got the rest of the medical profession being so dismal and
Yeah.
having poor social skills, and they'll diagnose you with zero affect, and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die, So
Yeah.
how do you how do you
Yeah.
and I want to recognize that in you, and I think that's fantastic. How do you approach a patient that maybe a new patient, or maybe an old patient, or a new patient that
Mhm.
has a fresh injury, and what do you ask them? How do you draw this mood out of them?
Well, right, wrong, or indifferent. Honestly, I try to get to the bottom of the barrel very quickly. And I kind of take that from myself. My wife and I, my wife Erica and I, we've always had a great relationship, and it's based on communication, much like it is with clients here. But I tell her all the time, I told her very early when she's like, "Why are you being like this?" I was like, "I've got to get all the way to the bottom before I climb back out." She's like, "Well, that's a long way to go," and I was like, "But the ladder's tall. Just let me get to the bottom, and I'll climb back out." And the reason I say that is because sometimes you have to exhaust, like, the kicking and screaming. Like, go ahead, harder, harder, like harder. Let's go. Keep screaming. But sometimes people need to realize they need to cap out at everything that is wrong, because then what's left? It's like, well, what if this doesn't work? Because they get to such a point and you get rid of the emotion. Like, as soon as they're done finding every reason that's wrong or bad, or that, they told me I needed a neck replacement at 35 when I was 12. It's like, okay, let's get past all of that. You done now? Because now there's only one way to go, is up. And it turns into, well, what if this wasn't work? What if this doesn't work? To, that's fine. I love arm crossers. What if it does? Then what? So I let them go all the way down to the bottom of the barrel, and I'll provoke them. And sometimes I'll be like, Dr. Terry, let me just tell you right now, we're going to go all the way to the bottom of this barrel, and I'm going to provoke you until you're done. So let's do it.
It won't
Tell
take
me
long.
everything that's wrong with that knee. I don't even need a snorkel.
No,
for that
I'm
one.
not that deep, so it won't take long. You can get a step ladder and get out of me. So,
But I love that avenue, because then you just exhaust all of the bad options, and also the people who want want out and that are invested in themselves. I told people when I had my family practice and we saw, 400 plus visits a week, and I loved that. I loved it. But I've always said, if you're willing to invest in yourself, I'm willing to help. I don't want to convince you, but if I can tell you're invested in yourself, let's get all the way to the bottom, because then we've just got clear sailing of, once we climb that ladder.
I'm going to ask you detail though. I mean, like how do you, and for our lay listeners and a lot of the doctors that are listening, that
Mhm.
how are you digging? Guy comes in, he's a rock star athlete. He just blew out one of his rotator cuffs and may
Mhm.
need surgery. And he's miserable. What are you saying to him?
Mhm.
How are you digging?
So the first question I ask, he's miserable, he's going on, and I stop him. I say, "What are you scared of most? What are you scared of most? What's the biggest thing, this issue?" "Well, I can't throw the ball." That ain't it. It ain't that you can't throw. What's the next thing? "Well, I'm letting my team down." What's the next thing? So I
Nice.
figure out what are they scared of most, and a lot of times it comes to family, or it comes to self-image. And then once we go down that road, then, like, I love the self-image, because, well, that's not the answer we want to hear.
Yeah.
It's the easiest one to start to self-correct, which only makes them a better person long term. And because of that injury, now they become more pure as an athlete, and they're well-rounded. Of, like, if that would have never happened, I would have never had this perspective. Um, if it's a family providing thing, well, then again, we just change the perspective. But I figure out what they're most scared of in an injury like that, and then transition from there, because they're willing to do the work. I mean, if you're any sort of athlete, it's like the work is required, it's necessary, and they're willing to do it. But it's oftentimes you got to hit the mental side and figure out not what the problem is and how it's going to affect their career. It's what they think the problem is. And the more we concentrate on the person and treat them as a person, I don't care about your career. Oh, I was having an all-star career. I'm in my 10th year. I'm in a contract year. It's like, you're missing the point. You are a person. I get to the personal side first. What's the biggest problem? What are you scared of because of it? And don't give me the athletic answer.
Okay, so first of all, I love where you're going with this. So I'm going to dig deeper with you for a moment here. So now you've got them down to the bare bones, most painful, perspective, and it may be self, it may be being a provider. Then how do you turn it around? How do you what are you asking them, or what are you sharing with them to pull them back out?
Sometimes all people need to hear is, you're in the right place. I'm here for you. Honestly, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you get traded, you walk through the door of a new facility, and it's like, "Hey, you got bullpens in 20." It's like, no, you're in the right place. They need community. They need support, not coddled. They need support, but they need to be treated like a person. Uh, so, I mean, that's really the easiest. The easiest part is, again, once you get down to the bottom of the barrel, and all you have to do is, like, look, we're going to bring you back. You just got to be honest with them.
Yeah.
And you're in the right place, and you build a community around them. You feed them people, you feed them resources. That way you can tell somebody, look, you're not alone in this, you're in the right place. But then they see who else is around them. You start connecting with people relationally. You give them resources that have gone through the same thing. You give them very specifics. It's like, look, Jackson had the same injury, he did this and this. Yours is a little different because of the position you play and how this is going about, and when you had this done, and the season that we're in, this is how we're going to do it a little different. And they see it's about them, it's not about the injury. And you literally show them that they're in the right place. That's how you turn it all around. Treat them as a person. They're not an injury, they're not a number. That number on the back is just signifying their, you know that they're on the team. That doesn't define who they are. They're a person. Tell them that they're in the right place, and if they're not, find the resources for them to put them in the right place. I could, one of the athletes here that, I see from Houston, it's like, you know what, if I don't have the facility, it's like, maybe I send them out to Dr. Terry. It's like, just give them the game plan and treat them as a person, and tell them, no matter what, you're in the right place. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it.
Right on. Yeah.
What else do you need? What else do you need from me? How's your wife? How's your kids? Do you need help getting them to practice? Like, is there anything we can do for you? Treat them as a person.
Oh, that's great. Um, You ever have to bring in a parent or talk to a coach off to the side, maybe?
Yeah, that's kind of required in our initial
Wow.
evaluation we do with all of our athletes. We call it the peer athlete evaluation, where you guys know Dr. Trent Nestler. We've collaborated with
Love that
him
guy.
to,
Love
yeah,
that
he's doing
guy.
some great work. Uh, and so we use part of his analysis, and I require, especially from the very beginning, to have the parents there as we put them through this evaluation. So I like to have that relationship from the beginning. I also like the fact that, look, don't be texting me about your kid. There's a time and place for that. Here's the emergency scenarios with that. Um, but we want them, again, the social skills to communicate with me. It's like, if they have any questions, if you're concerned about anything major, yes, absolutely. Like, call me. But the more that we can get through the athlete, especially the younger athletes, we're talking 10 to 18, 10 to 20. Um, but there is times where I do bring parents in from one of two perspectives. I've had some of the parents who, like I mentioned before, 3 for 4, 3 home runs, a strikeout, and the problem's the strikeout. Mom or dad goes, "What happened with the strikeout?" And if that's persistent, if that's consistent and persistent, then it's like, okay, I don't need to be telling the athlete, like, "Look, you got to get over it. Here's how you do that." It's like, no, no, no. At some point in time, it's as people, it's like, look, you're treating this person. What if this wasn't your kid? Would you say the same thing? We've had some of those conversations, and vice versa, where these kids aren't taking their program. We do a whole really high investigative blood work protocol where I know the athlete's not taking it seriously, and it's like, boom, you guys in here, we'll do it in this room actually, and we're going to hash it out. Look, and we'll make it very serious, and I'll help the parents kind of navigate how to communicate that, but that way they're in the know. Even the adults, the 22-year-olds, we have them sign the releases so their parents can have their information. I think that's important, because at any one time, if I need to hold some high accountability,
Mhm.
mommy and daddy are coming. Like,
Mhm.
they're not scared of the coach. It's like, no, don't tell my mom and dad. They could be 22 years old and on the way to the big leagues. It's like, no,
Right
don't
on.
tell them. It's like, yeah, we're gonna bring it in. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely scenarios where I think that's important, but I think there's also scenarios where they need to kind of hold themselves accountable and be able to manage some of that on their own.
How about the coaches? Because sometimes they're
Hmm.
the core of the problem. Any
Yeah,
anytime you have discussions with them or opportunities, that's always
yeah.
kind of
I mean,
delicate.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. I think, at the end of the day, I think a lot of coaches have two things in mind. That is the athletes, and they have their health and their accountability, their performance in mind, and they want to win. Like, you just want to have fun. No, everybody wants to win. I don't care what anybody says. It's like, as long as you're having fun, you're winning. No, that's not true. So it can be a very sensitive topic, because with high emotion, it clouds judgment and decision making. But I think a lot of coaches too, especially locally, as we've rolled this out, are very open to, once they drop their guard a little bit, because they're very protective of their teams too, for all of the right reasons. Sometimes they get a little jaded, but right now we have a lot of coaches that are like, where was this when I was a freshman in high school? This is so many great, topics from the three pillars that we talk about. So, but I do think, there's some of those coaches, and I think you need to be very, especially as you transition into college, that's something you need to sniff out. Is it's not always the deal that they're trying to make. Make sure it's somebody that you vibe with and want to play for. I mean, Bobby Knight, great coach, definitely a different coaching style. Not really my style. I wouldn't have went to IU to play basketball. Not that it's less of a coach, but you just have, there's different environments, different coaching. Look at somebody like Saban or Phil Jackson, and I think I don't, there's definitely a wrong way to coach, but I think now more than ever, I do believe that more coaches are looking for resources and how to have some of these conversations, or putting staff in the right place, or want resources where it's like, look, I can't change me, I don't know how to have that conversation, but if I can be aware of what's going on with each one of my athletes in different scenarios, I just want to be able to have the resources to point them to. um, but again, it just goes back to, every player on your team might have a number on their back. They're still a person. Keep that in mind and figure out what inspires each athlete individually. There's only so many ways to do that. So it's like, oh, I've got 110 kids on my football team. It's like, yeah, but you really only have 3 or 4 ways that you need to figure out how to inspire, and then fit that to each athlete. Or even reprimand. Like sometimes you need the switch, man, and you're gonna run, take off, grab poles. But how you also, I don't even want to say punish, but how you re-inspire, as I like to say, matters too. It's like, how do you discipline? How do you encourage? There's feel, felt, found. There is, love languages are real. Like, how do you find more out about each one of your athletes? Take time and learn about your athletes, because how they are under the helmet, how they are behind the mask is their personal preference. Learn who they are, because that's the athlete they are. That's how their mindset is. Their mind doesn't change once they're on the field. They just perform. They're still the same person. Figure out what drives them, how they respond, and use that to your advantage. Not your voice, not your volume.
Yeah. You actually said some magic just a moment ago that I want to highlight, and that is, really know your athlete. And it takes, it's a special skill to really understand. When I worked for Jimmy Johnson, he had a degree in industrial psychology, so he knew how to motivate people. And then, Bill Parcells was he knew how to get into the athlete's head, and it was fascinating how he would, figure out what would drive somebody. And then when we had Coach Saban, who failed miserably in the pros, he ran an operation out of fear and oppression, and it was a blanketed approach to everyone. And it was just fascinating how, when we were doing bad, people said, "Screw him, we're not supporting him." And so, what you said is the jewelry of understanding, your athlete and what drives him. But it takes a skill, and it's personal. Do you? I want to transition a little bit from the mental side and ask you more about physical stuff, because that is obviously your first specialty. And talk to me about specialization in sports, and how we're seeing athletes that are a one sport perennial athlete, and that's not the way it used to be when I was growing up. But
Right.
what are you seeing these days, and what do you think about that?
Well, I think, I'm not a big fan of diversity of a portfolio necessarily when it comes to athletes. I shouldn't say I'm not a fan. I if it had a scoreboard, I played it. I was in everything from a race car behind a golf club. I was a big baseball guy. That was my thing. I played a lot of football. So it's like, if it had a scoreboard, I played it. And I think there's a lot of value to that, because you want to talk about the neurology and the development centers of the brain. And, people like to talk about muscle memory. It's like, newsflash, muscles don't have brains. There's no memory. It's a learned pattern. It's a skill. Like, it's reproducibility based on a cortical center. Like, you're literally building connections to be able to do a skill. And, even like, I never really got to finish my hockey career when I moved from LA to St. Louis when I was very young, but I played hockey even when I was younger, and I didn't get to do that. But now my boys are playing hockey. So I'll tell this as a story. I think it's very important to have some sort of diversity in what you play. You don't have to play all of the things, but you can also strategically, like, kids are, if they love sports, they're going to love multiple sports. They're going to enjoy playing sports and competing. Now, I think you can have some strategy and teach them a little bit of strategy. And even as a parent, don't push them to play what you want them to play, but have a little bit of strategy where it's like, okay, you can think of golf, hockey, soccer are three great sports to pair together. The golf swing and the hockey, slap shot and hockey is kind of the same on the same plane. You have the footwork that it takes. So now you've got soccer. Typically they can be in 3 different seasons. Now everything seems like it's year round anymore, but now you've got potentially 3 different seasons with 3 different sports, and the coordination abilities and the learned patterns of how you move and hand-eye coordination, a puck or a wrist shot, to how you release the hands in a golf swing, to the footwork playing soccer and juggling the ball. You see all those guys in the outside the locker room, juggling balls before a hockey game. I think it's very important just developmentally to play multiple sports. to pack your schedule and play as many sports as possible. No, at the beginning, introduce them to sport in general. Teach them how to carry themselves through competition and how to lose better very quickly. I always tell people I hate losing more than I like winning. That's not the greatest mindset to have. So figure out how they are as a competitor and figure out what they take to, and then compile that. I truly think, I haven't heard this before, but I truly think you can be very strategic if you wanted to be, because we all only have so much time. We'd love to do whatever our kids want to do as they're growing up and give them the world and be at 16 different places at 16 different times, or the 16 different places at the same time. But I think you can be strategic too. And I think there's a lot of value to having multiple sports being played throughout, your 8, 10, 12, 16-year-old days. And then you can start to narrow down after that. So I wouldn't say throw all your eggs in one basket. I had a lot of people say I should have continued my football career to Wisconsin. Didn't. I have no regrets, but the availability and what that gave me just mentally, and what sport was about and how I could apply different visions differently into different sports. It's like I was a catcher. So behind a catcher's mask, sitting back behind the plate, and that vision that I had going over the middle to catch a football, just literally vision wise and seeing the field and who is out there, and how my guys were responding to certain plays, the coordination of, glove hand going from one hand to two hands. And there's just so much that's advantageous to playing multiple sports. I do believe it's super important, but I think you can be strategic. You don't need to play necessarily 8 or 9 unless you want to. If you have that capacity, do it. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can be strategic with a few for sure.
So you have a patient. I'm sure you've had many a patient that have come in maybe with their parent, and they're playing one sport all year round, and it's almost humorous at this point. They go, how often are you playing tennis? And they say, well, we practice 5 days a week. And you go, oh, that's good. When are the tournaments? Oh, on Saturday and Sunday. So they're doing 7 days a week all year round.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to them when they're coming in with tennis elbow or supraspinatus tendonitis? I mean, you can do so much healing. What are you telling them how to participate in
So
helping?
that the first thing I tell people, and I had to go through this just the other day, is we see a lot of dance world right now too, a lot of hip labrums and things like that. And this girl was in tears because she knew what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I always lead with, I'm here to make sure you're on the floor, on the court, between the lines as much as possible. If I truly think that you are in danger, I will pull you. But my job is not to tell you why you have to sit out. My job and my heart, my passion, my vision for everything I do with student athletes is to make sure you can do what you want and love to do whenever you want to do it. I want to have you on the field, not tell you why you need to sit off. So if we can fix it quickly, let's fix it. Now, if the training schedule, they're practicing 5 days a week. Their competitions are over the weekend, sometimes multiple during each day of Saturday and Sunday. I just had a volleyball player go to Chicago, and he played 6 games in basically a day and a half, or 6 sets in a day and a half. I'm like, holy cow, Connor. But that is what it is.
Yeah.
So what I do in having the conversation, the first thing I ask is, what are you doing in those first 5 days before the weekend? I am all for training 7 days a week, and that can be a different conversation because there's consistency in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's what training is what day. What are you doing each day? I love the consistency of 7 days, but now we get to go into the training side and be very, again, strategic and particular about what are we doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and figure that out. The injury side of things, there's a time for rest. Again, the 7 days doesn't mean you're 12 hours a day training, but there's so much more on the nutritional side. There's so much in the technology and some of the things that we use here to be able to bring people back from that. Having the inflammation conversation. Inflammation, I think, is very underrated. I think there's better ways to take care of it than our norms, we'll say. But it makes the longer inflammation's in a certain area, it only makes the tissues more brittle. So how can we train accordingly to still get that consistency if possible, as long as it's not like a tear. We're having tendonitis, not full thickness tears. We're having tendonitis issues. Okay, well, is there anything we can do on the training side to promote, proper movement of inflammation, lymph flow, and things like that? How can we adjust that schedule to make sure they stay consistent? Because we all know too, all it takes is one day to turn into next week taking 2 days off or adjusting that schedule. It takes 16 weeks to get into shape. It takes a week and a half to get out. So the consistency is key, but there's sometimes you have to have that conversation. It's like, here's how we need to rest. Also, a great way to throw in other sports is it's like, okay, well, you're not, if you're a pitcher in baseball, it's like, okay, well, you're not throwing bullpens for 6 to 10 days. But you're just not. I have to protect who you are, but everything else that we can do, here's how you're going to train going forward. Here's what you can do in training with the upper half. Here's how we're going to train the lower half, and shift the focus and the mentality on not what's wrong, but how I'm going to get better everywhere else. That's a lot of the conversation I will have.
Recovery and regenerative therapy. How are you educating the patients on understanding recovery in the absence of pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, recovery is, we do recovery nights here at the office now. We've had, probably a dozen teams already since Christmas come in and do some of we call it our recovery hallway. It is very, very important. Just because there's no symptom, doesn't mean there's something wrong. It's, where smoke isn't always the first sign of fire. It's just a sign of fire. Right.
Right on.
So that's one of the analogies I use too. And also, buy a Ferrari. Tell me how you take care of it. Wait till the engine starts knocking to change the oil. Like, what the hell are we doing here? It's
I like that.
It's like, you are a specimen. Everybody is. I don't care if you're a CPA that doesn't have an athletic bone in your body, but if you are an athlete, it's like, we're all a pristine piece of art, and you want to wait till the fire alarm starts going off and depend on something like insurance to fix it. It's like, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's not coverage enough to bring you back from where you were when all you had to do was take care of it in the first place. So the recovery side of things, I do love talking about, and I will use those analogies, because it's like, how many people, like, what's your favorite car? And a lot of these, again, we're big in dance world right now, which is super awesome. My wife's a dancer. Our dance coach is one of our ATs. So we've been doing the recovery nights, and I said, what's your favorite car? And they're all like, oh, Range Rover. It's like, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. I said, how would you take care of that if you went and got a Range Rover and an NIL deal like tomorrow? And they'd be like, oh man, I'd like wash it every day. I was like, great. That's why you guys are sitting in these boots. That's why we're telling you guys to get IVs. That's why when you have any sort of inflammation, we start talking tissue regenerative therapy, because I don't care that it's not broke. I care that it's dirty, and you deserve to have the most pristine piece of art, as shiny as possible. And it's going to save you points on the floor every single time. Proper structure is proper function. Proper recovery is proper care. It's, what's one of the analogies is, proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Yeah.
Like, when are we going to start being creative and stop being reactive?
Right.
We all want to take care of ourselves when it hurts, when it sucks, when we're sick, when a lot of that can really be handled on the front end.
That's great. That's where I usually say success is where preparation meets opportunity, and that's great. So I like that. I can tell you something. I just learned something from you that is absolutely fantastic. Instead of telling the patient, you're a Ferrari, you need maintenance, you need to, if you're a race car, they go to the pit, they take pit stops, to make sure everything's fine. But you turned that into a question and made them answer. And I think that is beautiful, because now they have to be responsible for the answer, and that the answer that they gave is like revelation for them. So thanks for that. That was
great. No problem. Again, treat them as a person. Let them give you the answers. They know all the answers. Like, we are all so smart. And I tell that to all my athletes. I was like, I don't care if you're 10 years old, you're smart. What do you think you should do? What is your favorite car? What is your favorite color? What are your favorite cleats? Okay. then let's just figure out how to get you what you want and make sure we're doing it properly.
That's
Dustin,
wait.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's why I chose a Yugo, because it doesn't take that much to keep it on the road.
Do they even make Yugos anymore?
All right,
Yeah.
a Honda Accord.
You better watch that Pinto you have out in the garage
right?
there.
It's just super simple.
I'm not sure I'd want anything different on the 101 freeway out there anyway.
You know what? That's why we play bumper cars out there. It's
my God.
They run from, when you have a dented car, they run from you. It's like, forget the pristine stuff. Let's just go easy.
Yeah.
Hey, Dustin, I'm going to ask you.
That could be your recovery conversation altogether. Why don't you drive the Mercedes that you have at home? Because I'm going down the 101.
Right?
This is a recovery time. I'm not trying to fix it. I know what's going to happen.
Totally. Right. That's funny.
Dustin, I want to, before we enter our rapid fire questions, I want to ask you, what drives you, man? What personally motivates you to do what you do?
Changing the stereotype of very misconceived things that are worth doing.
Like what?
Like chiropractic. Like, providing resources that should have been provided a long time ago, fighting for people who are worth fighting for, and more importantly, fighting for people that need to feel that need to feel that they are worth fighting for. I think this is more than just athletes for me. I think
how does
truly, be the change you want to see in the world. I think a lot of us need to have more self-worth, more confidence, more resources, more things to trust. That's the biggest thing I'm finding is people don't know where to go and who to trust. So I think it's, for me, that what drives me is that everybody deserves an opportunity to have their question answered and to know what's available, not be provoked and emotionally manipulated to make a decision that maybe they don't want to make. Honestly, that's why we took chiropractic out of the name of our practice a couple of years ago. I consider myself very principled in chiropractic as far as the adjustment's concerned. If I was going to do one thing, I would adjust and that would be it. But I don't want to be so naive that there's not other great things to get people farther faster. But we took chiropractic out of the name because of the stereotype. So when people ask, I didn't know you were a chiropractor, I said, good, because this is what this looks like. And so, even on athletic care, in dance world and gymnastics world, we just had Lindenwood here just cut a bunch of sports, and two of them being our artistic athletes, as we like to call them. And it's like, providing resources for them. It's like, there's still a lot of those teams that aren't NCAA approved or haven't been given that opportunity, that have even less resources, that are winning championships at a different division that should be D1. And it's like changing the stereotype of, just because they're artistic athletes and it doesn't look like, sweat on the floor, a lot of contact, and, big scoreboards and huge stadiums, it's like they're still athletes. Let's change the stereotype of who gets what and why. And that's really what drives me is if I can create a ripple. Like, I like to fly under the radar. I joke with my older brother or my younger brother. He's very much high flying, I will stand in the spotlight, where if I can just create a ripple and be on the front end of something like this, like, I love doing this stuff. I love doing the podcast. If it was somebody else, if it was Erin in here talking to you guys, I know that I've had an impact on her, that she would be well equipped to get the point across just like I would. So I don't need to be the spotlight. I just need to create a ripple to give people just a clarity of mind that there are resources out there, remove the stereotypes of them, and let them make a logical decision, not an emotional decision. And that's really what does it for me. I'm just happen to do it in the athletic world, but it translates across everybody.
Thanks. That's cool. All right. You ready for 5 rapid fire questions?
Got it.
All right, man.
Let's do it.
Here we go. Now, a little bit of criteria for you. You got to answer, brevity is brilliance. You got to answer in a succinct manner, but damn it, we always get caught up in asking you
I like how he led with that. He's like, you've been so long-winded this whole time. I've got to put the choke collar on him here a little.
I say this on everybody. No, this is fantastic. No, it's going to be a stretch, but it'll be good. All right. So Now, question number one. Are you ready, Dustin? You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Speak less, say more. Speak less, say more. Got it.
No. It's all right, man. Would you rather tie the game and ensure going into overtime, or risk it all and go for the win?
Tie the game.
Interesting.
It's more than me. We just need an opportunity. It's bigger than me. I'm not going to pass up a great shot. I'm not going to pass up a hanging curveball, but my intention is to have an opportunity.
Nice.
I don't need to be the hero.
All right. Question number two. By the way, that was pretty good. Here we go. Question number two. Best story an athlete told you that still makes you laugh.
Oh man.
There's probably a lot of them.
Oh man. Well, so this one will be brief. So there was a buddy of mine when I did some baseball stuff down in Florida. During practice, somehow somebody got into his locker, which wasn't hard to do. And he ended up with his sister's wardrobe in his locker to change into after practice. They took his clothes and left him with his with some of his sister's wardrobe because they lived together down in Florida, and she was going to college and we were playing baseball together. And I think there was a conspiring effect where we came out and he was in his towel and getting ready to get dressed, and he's got these Victoria's Secrets and the skirt with a crop top, and like, oh boy, and his clothes were nowhere to be found. Yeah, that was that's the kind of story I think of when you tell me that, and I'm like, oh man. Luckily he had the personality of, well, I might try these on, and I was like, no, you can't do that. That never goes away. I was like, well, we'll find you some clothes. But everybody stuck it to him for a while, and that was he pulls out little purple Victoria's Secrets and can't find his own underwear. That was pretty good.
Awesome. That is awesome. And actually, I have to laugh even harder. That reminds me of when the New York Mets were in town, and I went to the stadium to take care of them, and I had done that for years. And one of them was, I was working on somebody, and a couple of them were laughing off to the side, and I go, "What's going on?" And the catcher at the time, I won't mention his name, but he did allow me to use this story in some of my lectures, and they said that, how superstitious baseball players can be. Well, he slept with a woman the night before and had a career high night. And I go, all right, cool. That's cool. And he goes, yeah, but today he stole her underwear and he's wearing it right now under his uniform. I said, whoa, wait a minute. You're kidding. He pulls his pants down, man. And I took a photograph of that thing.
Oh man.
Leopard print thong with pink lace on the outside. I said, dude, it's a good thing you're wearing your undergarments, or that thing be driving right up there. But anyway, that's another story.
At least tell me it was playoff time. At least tell me it was playoff time.
It was close. Yeah, it was close enough. And he was a catcher, so he had to squat. Talk about butt floss. All right. So anyway, all right. Question number three. Question number three. In a sentence or less, why do you love being a chiropractor?
I mean, with what I've learned in almost 10 years of practice right now, I just want to be a resource. I tell people I'm smarter than I look. I just want to be a resource. If I don't have the answer, we'll find it. Some of them say, oh, thank God. But the quick answer is, why do I love to be a chiropractor? I just want to be a resource. And the second sentence to that is, with everything we know, with what we do, what we can provide, and how we think, I think a lot of us do a great job of thinking very critically and outside of the box. There's so many things we can provide to prevent piss poor production, piss poor performance, honestly. So I love to be a resource from a different angle.
That's great, man. Question number 4. Best health tip you tell your patients that it may be something that you repeat often or unique for you?
Health tip. There's really a couple of them, and they're overthought, but the best one I give is somebody's depending on you to be your best. And again, getting them into their own mindset of what that means, that's the biggest health tip I can give, because you got to get them on board to know that they're enough. I can tell them drink all the water in the world, take all these proper supplements based on their blood work, get adjusted. But at the end of the day, they don't need to understand why what we do works. They need to understand that somebody, and it's not the same person every day, but somebody's counting on them to be their best every day.
That's fantastic. That I like the dimension that takes too. Thanks for sharing that. Question number 5, last one. What tip have you learned from a guest on your show that you implemented into your daily routine?
Don't praise the statistic.
Oh, yeah.
That was very, very recent, and wish I'd have learned it sooner. We have implemented that came out on a podcast recording that will literally release tomorrow. I'm super glad you added that. I've got chills just thinking about that.
No kidding.
I just did a long form post the other day. The number one thing that I have learned and taken from somebody is it was a story he had told, and I just came up with a one-liner. I was like, you know what you just taught me, Will? Is stop praising the statistic.
Well, we're just going to have to listen to your podcast to find out the better part of that story. That is fantastic, because I don't want you to reveal too much, because we need to tune into that one.
I was waiting for either the carrot or if you were going to dive into it, but
I was. But I said, you know what? Let's be fair. I'm going to have people get motivated to listen to your podcast to get more of the juice out of that one.
Absolutely. In fact, we're going to close on that note, and I want everybody listening to the show to tune into the Pure Athlete and listen to this podcast, listen and support this endeavor that we have Dustin's doing, and leave in our comment section on our show what the answer to that last question is. And to prove that you actually listened to the show. So I think that'd be an awesome way to find out what the statistics, what he meant by that. So leave that in the comment section of our show. Dustin, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
You guys.
And being part of
thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing. It's such an awesome time meeting you guys out in Vegas too. And hopefully we can do anytime you need to fill in an episode, I'd be happy to be on with you guys. I love what you guys are doing. Awesome. So thank you again. Very humble.
Awesome.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate it.
All right, buddy. You have a good one. Thanks. Keep doing what you're doing and keep helping those and keep putting chiropractic in a better light than it was before you got here.
Guaranteed, buddy. Thank you guys.
All right.